All right, you guys, welcome back into another One Piece video. Today, we're here to talk about chapter 1154, Rocks D Xebec, Blackbeard, the Galley-La Company, King Harold, and so much more. Brother, this chapter was phenomenal. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of this chapter, we do have to start with the cover page story. You guys know how we do things here. We like to start from the very beginning and just work our way down chronologically. So, with that being said, we got volume 38 of Yamato's journey. And I will admit, if you guys have watched these videos before, you know that I have grown somewhat sour on Yamato's adventure thus far, right? I know the payoff is going to be absolutely insane. I don't think anybody's denying that. But it's just all the meandering we're getting in between, brother. Kawamatsu, the sumo match. Inuarashi at the beach. Some of that I could have done without. But, this is extra content at the end of the day, so I can't complain. But I will admit, this week's cover page, I really enjoyed. Because we have a mystery afoot, right? We have people finally theorizing about the cover page because Yamato is visiting the grave of a Wano hero who was born in the West Blue, but was later raised in Ringo. Who is this? Who does this grave belong to? So I've been online, I've had conversations about this already, and it seems that there are three main candidates as to who this could be. And there is one candidate, in my opinion, that stands head and shoulders above the rest. So we'll talk about that person first. And the main candidate that I really enjoy is that this could belong to Shimotsuki Ushimaru, the blue-haired samurai that was in the cave with Yamato in the past. I think that if this is that samurai, then she can finally pay her respects to him. It'll be a nice full circle moment, and it will be beautiful. But there are some issues with this grave belonging to Shimotsuki Ushimaru, and that is mainly due to this hero's description. They say that this person, whoever it is, was born in the West Blue. Shimotsuki Ushimaru, we don't really know much about him. Everything we know about Ushimaru revolves around Wano. We don't know exactly where he was given birth at. So, he could have been from the West Blue. He might not be from the West Blue. It's really hard to tell. But another thing that kind of eggs this towards it being Shimotsuki Ushimaru's grave is that this is a grave in Ringo. And we have to remember that Ushimaru was actually the daimyo of Ringo when he went off to fight Kaido. So I think there are some things that point towards him, but there are some things that we do need cleared up at the same time. But yeah, I think Ushimaru is my main candidate right now. But the other two candidates, while they could work, I will admit it would be odd if it were them. But the second candidate I've been seeing people bring up is Ryuma. Ryuma is a legendary hero from Wano. He could have been born in the West Blue and then later was raised in Ringo. We don't know. Kind of like Ushimaru, their past is a blank slate. Oda can kind of do whatever he wants with them. So yeah, maybe they were born outside of Wano and then they were brought in. But the reason why I do not like the idea of this grave belonging to Ryuma is because Yamato wouldn't really have any connections with him whatsoever. Right? Imagine if this were Ryuma. Or hell, let's bring up the third candidate. The third candidate is Jigoro, the samurai zombie that had Zoro's shadow back in Thriller Bark. People are saying it could be him because that zombie is from the West Blue, and they also fought like a samurai. Technically, that's because of Zoro's shadow, but people are saying, he could be a samurai at the end of the day because of his name Jigoro, right? That's a very Wano Japanese name in general, so maybe Jigoro is that hero. And I think that could fit, right? We do know that Gekko Moria came to Wano to steal corpses. That's where he got Ryuma from, so maybe he got Jigoro at the same time. So this could be Jigoro's grave, as much as Ryuma's grave. But the problem with those two characters, in my opinion, is that Yamato wouldn't care. I mean, maybe I'm an asshole, but if Yamato were to go to this grave and it's somebody she doesn't know, would she care? Like, I'm sure Yamato is very respectful. I think most people are. You know, we throw up the hands, we pray. But and then we'd also ask, who is that person, right? Oh, Yamato, this is Ryuma's grave. Who? Huh? You know, I doubt Yamato knows the full history of Wano to know who Ryuma is. And then as far as Jigoro goes, what's the connection there? Like, oh yeah, this belongs to Jigoro. Jiga who? You know, like, what are we talking about here? So that's why I don't think it's them. I think Ushimaru's like the perfect candidate, but you know, maybe if it's Jigoro or Ryuma, we'll have a funny moment. Maybe there will be some connection there, but I just don't see it right now. Like, imagine, you know, put yourself in Yamato's shoes for a second. You are at a family get-together. Your mom comes up to you and says, hey, honey, the legendary neighbor John passed away. This is his grave right here. And you're sitting there and you're like, wait, who the hell is John? Who is this guy? Yeah, you know, I think most people would be respectful and, you know, pray for John, but I mean, we don't know that guy. Like, what are you talking about, Mom? So yeah, I don't know. I'm not too sure where they're going with this one, but like I said, I do like this cover page story because it does amp up the conversation. You know, as silly as Jigoro and Ryuma sound, they are still semi-valid options. Right? I love that we're actually discussing this now. So yeah, W cover page story in my opinion. On to the first page of the chapter, we pick up exactly where we left off last week. We are still 63 years in the past, and we see the Big Mom rampage. We hear about how Jarl lost his partner, Cascade Beard Jarl, to Big Mom. We even see a panel of Big Mom looking up, licking her lips. She's drooling, looking for some destruction. And we get a narrator box talking about Big Mom as well. They say that her name was Charlotte Lindlin. Despite being a mere human, she left a large part of a giant village in ruins. She would later go on to become an emperor of the sea, earning the epithet Big Mom. And it's kind of funny, you know, because current day, we've already defeated Big Mom. You know, she's not exactly here anymore. But even still, seeing this panel of Big Mom, I'm like, yo, she's kind of a monster, man. We cannot forget. It's like Oda's really hammering it in, like, hey, guys, don't forget, Big Mom was scary. Big Mom was scary. We then go on and we see the calamities that befell Elbaph after Loki's birth. We see the sudden fires, the windstorms, the blistering cold, the slow and bad harvest. We see the famine. And of course, this is all attributed to Loki's curse. You know, people are starting to believe more and more that this is all because of Loki being born. And part of the reason why they believe this is because of Queen Estrid. Like I said, it's one thing if a commoner says, oh, it's because of Loki. It's another thing if the queen is the one spitting this out. She says, now do you see? This is all that child's doing. This land was cursed because you failed to kill it immediately. The guard says, no, Queen, surely this is just a coincidence. The Queen ends up glaring at the guard, and then that is when baby Loki, with the worst timing known to mankind, ends up busting through her chamber doors, saying goo goo gaga with his demonic eyes. And she says, he's staring at me. Take it away. Don't ever let that monster near me again. Loki, who of course is just a baby, has no idea what's going on. He just simply wanted to receive some love from his mom. Estrid then piles it on even harder, and she says, gouge out those monstrous eyes. If left unchecked, his curse will grow till it brings about this nation's collapse. What's funny is that none of the guards actually try to gouge out Loki's eyes. Like, even they know that's a little bit too far. They're like, oh, Queen, this is all a coincidence. We're not going to gouge out your son's eyes. We're not going to do that. And imagine if you were one of the guards that actually took out Loki's eyes, King Harold would probably kill you. So yeah, I think it makes sense that none of the guards actually did that, you know, thankfully. So we go on more, and we see the chaotic state that Elbaph is in. We have giant villages attacking other giant villages in search of food and crop. We even see that the rumor of Loki's curse is actually starting to spread to the common villagers now. We have some old man saying, hey, I heard a rumor about that princeling born in the castle. Apparently, he's cursed. He's the reason for this. And that rumor, it latched on so hard that the villagers are now turning their ire towards Ida and Hyrule. And here's the thing, I can't exactly blame the villagers for this, right? I feel like in times of crisis, people generally look for a scapegoat, some reasoning behind the madness. And that scapegoat, unfortunately, was Loki. And this is because of the queen, mind you, because like I said, it's one thing if a commoner is the one spreading this rumor. It's another thing if the queen herself is backing this rumor up. So yes, the giants end up attacking Hyrule and Ida because of this. One of the giants say, as his elder brother, you will take responsibility as a sacrifice. Ida then says, what are you talking about? Don't you know my son's a cutie who's going to be the world's longest living man? Crazy line, as somebody who does these breakdowns, I have to shed a light on some of these lines that could mean something, could mean nothing later on. But as far as Hyrule eventually being the oldest living giant in the world, honestly, that could happen. I mean, it's not like a hard achievement to obtain. You just have to live, right? I mean, hell, Jarl has that title right now, and eventually Jarl is gonna die, right? He's already 406 years old. At this point, who knows how long he actually has left? So that title will be up for grabs again, and then that giant will die, and then that giant will die. So yeah, I guess one day Hyrule could be the oldest giant in the world. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll be around to see that though, right? Because you gotta keep in mind, like, all the Straw Hats are human. Minus Brooke, who has the Yomi Yomi no Mi, I don't think anybody's going to see
Hyrule
survive to that age that we know of, but low be it for me to say. So the giant ends up choking out Ida, saying, "Can it, Ida? You're nothing but an outsider who seduced our King Harold." Ida then responds and says, "Go to hell, I love this country." Hyrule picks up his sword and says, "Don't lay a finger on my mom," even though he has like 5 fingers on her already. And that is when King Harold ends up showing up, and he absolutely flattens this guy. King Harold says, "Word has finally reached me about Loki's birth and the recent famine. I was building a rapport with various nations when the news came, and our allies acted without hesitation. Even though they are small, they brought a lot of food to satiate even us giants, and we will graciously accept their aid." And in that double spread, we see dozens of ships flocking towards Elbaph with food in tow. We are quite literally witnessing the fruits of King Harold's labor paying off right here. So we go on though, and King Harold is hit with some bad news. And the bad news is that Estrid, the queen, his wife, died while he was away. What's kind of funny about this is that we don't know what she died to. Like, we don't know what illness she had. We don't know if there was like a cure, if they were lacking doctors, if they even tried to help her, or if her sickness was even real in the first place. Because she fell ill right after giving birth to Loki. So it kind of seems like she just made herself sick. Like, oh, he's cursed, he's cursed, he's cursed. And then because she believed that, she just ended up getting sick, right? It was like a mental fatigue kind of thing. But yes, King Harold is lamenting Estrid's death, which makes sense, right? He doesn't know how twisted she actually was. He spent like maybe a couple years with her and then he just left. So yeah, he doesn't really know what she was truly like. So he turns around though, and he sees Loki, his son. He's so happy
that he holds Loki up like that monkey.
But Loki, who is only a few months old at this point in time, he can't smile, right? Because his mom never loved him early on, he just lost that part of his heart. And I gotta say this, but King Harold, he's not a bad dad. He's not a bad dad at all. But is he a neglectful dad? I say yes. Is King Harold an absent dad? I would argue yes, because the guards walk up to King Harold and they explain, very haphazardly, they're trying to beat around the bush. They're like, yeah, your son, he was born with a condition that affects his eyes. He can see through those eyes, but, and then they were going to explain more, but King Harold cuts them off and he simply says, "I understand. What a pity. King Harold, are you gonna at least check his eyes? You know, are you gonna see what they're talking about at the very least? He doesn't do that. And then he says, ah, man, like, he can't smile. It must be because he lost his mom. Huh. What's with all of these scratches on him? What's with all these scrapes? And we see the guards are about to explain what happened to Loki, saying, oh, no, those are ... And then we just cut away. Brother, Harold, what are you doing, man? And then I'm going to go ahead and skip over to the next Harold parenting technique. But because Harold is constantly going on diplomatic missions, he ends up leaving Loki in the care of Estrid's brother. And surprise, surprise, Estrid's brother, who's pretty ugly, mind you, he doesn't really care for Loki. He absolutely hates Loki's existence. So Loki, of course, ends up getting abused and mistreated again and again. And at what point do we kind of blame King Harold for this? Because let's be real for a minute, guys. If Loki, after this, after Estrid's death, even though he can't smile anymore, if he was sent to Ida, or if Ida was brought to the castle, or if Loki was spending time with Hyrden at this age, I think he'd be fine. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's crazy to say. If only King Harold knew what was actually happening. If only King Harold actually spent quality time with his son, things could have been very, very different. Speaking of King Harold, though, at this point in the flashback, is it just me? Or does King Harold look like Kaido? I know some people don't like that theory. They're just saying that's how all guys in One Piece look. Like how all women in One Piece kind of look like Nami. They're like, oh, it's just Oda's design. He's a one-trick pony. But I don't know, man. I'm looking at King Harold and I cannot help but imagine a good timeline version of Kaido here. Like, he literally looks like him. I have seen some people saying that King Harold and Kaido have some differences in their appearance. And I understand that, and that's because, whenever two people come together to make a baby, you don't only just resemble your dad, you also tend to resemble your mom as well. We don't know who Harold slept with, if he is Kaido's dad. So Kaido, to our knowledge, if this theory is true, could just look a little bit different because of that. I don't think that's an absurd theory. And then, of course, we do know that Kaido is an Oni, and we don't know where Onis stem from, which is why a prevailing theory is that Oni actually come from ancient giants mixed with maybe humans. So there is a chance that is the case, and we do know that King Harold is constantly leaving Elbaph. He's constantly leaving Ida and Estrid behind. So if you're telling me that King Harold's getting it on the side, like, I wouldn't say otherwise. I don't know, man. Like I said, it's just a theory right now. It could just be a coincidence, but you gotta admit, they do look pretty damn similar, bro. And then, of course, with all the parallels between Loki and Kaido. I mean, we see Loki in this chapter wielding a Kanabo. We see Loki jumping from pretty much a sky island all the way down. Like, come on, guys. You know that Oda is definitely laughing it up in the studio right now. So we go on a little bit more, and we see that King Harold, ever since he has returned to Elbaph, his diplomacy missions started bearing even more fruit. They started establishing more trade routes. And not just that, but Elbaph's long winter finally came to a close. And that is when we see that Ida and Hyrden, in the meanwhile, have just now established a bar down in the underworld. The same bar, mind you, that we saw at the beginning of Elbaph with Dory, Brogy, and Colin, and it is the same bar that Shanks and his fleet were at back during the Eustace Kid fight. Which now, of course, begs the question of, where is Ida current day? Is she dead? Is she still around? Did she perhaps move to a different island? We don't know, because current day, the bartender, the barmaid, is actually a girl named Mato. Ida's not there. Maybe it was Ida's day off. Maybe Ida was in the back room, managing the finances. We're not too sure. That is still a really big old question. So, of course, because I do like to point out random, odd, and small details, Ida's apron. Ida's apron has the word frog on it. I'm assuming it says frog. It could just be rog, but I'm assuming there's like an F there, but it's simply cut off because of the angle. But yeah, her apron says frog, and Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things, guys. I feel like I had to point that out, or somebody would say, hey, Sai, did you notice that? It says frog. And yeah, I think that's one of the main things with One Piece. Like, you never know what's going to be important and what's not going to be important. You know, there's a lot of things in One Piece that Oda has foreshadowed or hinted at throughout the series. And they're usually one-liners. They're usually small plot details. But in that same vein, there are a lot of details that are really odd, that really are just odd in general, right? That never have a deeper meaning. So I always feel like it's important to point out these small things. We can just kind of laugh at it if nothing ever comes out of it, so that's fine by me. But yes, her apron says frog, and the only genuine connection I can make with that is that there was a member of Shanks' Grand Fleet who was here by this bar, and he was a frog guy. I don't know if you guys remember him, but his name was Baltoes Garrotini, and he was a part of Shanks' weakling Grand Fleet. So maybe it's a callback to him? Yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was fun to bring up. I love just talking about Baltoes Garrotini. What a crazy character. Baltoes Garrotini? Brother, who named him that? Change the epithet, man. So yes, we see Ida's Tavern, and then we go on and we get another time skip, and we are now 56 years in the past, and that is when Jarl says to Harold, hey, you were at the scene of the Reverie incident, weren't you? King Harold says, yes, my friend was one of the invited kings. He smuggled me in as one of his guards. I couldn't ask the questions I wanted to without blowing my cover. If that murder hadn't have happened, I might have been exposed. Jarl says, oh, if you were caught, all this would be the least of your worries. Haven't you heard the tale of the Galley-La Warhammer Company? King Harold says they're that gruff troop of giant shipwrights that arm themselves with warhammers, right? I thought that they were just a myth. And Jarl says, no. They existed. They really did travel far and wide, sending letters back to Elbaph. I received the final letter myself. It said that they have all been captured. Can you believe it? Over 100 warriors were taken prisoner, including ancient giants. King Harold brings up the question and he says, do you think the world government was responsible? Jarl says there is no doubt that they once faced a great enemy. However, they sank deep into the ocean at a certain point in history. To be blunt, there's probably a deeper reasoning as to why your ideals haven't worked out, and it has nothing to do with you. And King Harold says, oh, lingering animosity, huh? And that is when Jarl brings up a second rumor, and he says that he also heard a story about a frozen army of giants somewhere. It seems that our people are regarded as enemies of the larger world. Sorry, I don't often read everything verbatim, but I feel like everything flowed so nicely there, I kind of had to, right? So, there's a lot we gotta talk about with this. Galley-La. Obviously, you hear that word, you hear that name, and most people would automatically start thinking about Water 7, because Iceberg owns a company called Galley-La. Apparently, it's written almost identically. So, what is up with that? Did the shipwrights have influence on Iceberg? Or perhaps, was this just a coincidence? Well, it's One Piece. There's no such thing as coincidences. I definitely think that Iceberg named his company after these Warhammer giants, after these ancient shipwrights. But now, the question becomes why? How? How did Iceberg know about these ancient giant shipwrights? Well, there's two main camps for this. On one hand, you could say that Iceberg knew about their legend. Like, oh, there was this ancient company called Galley-La. They were goats in their field. Let's name our company Galley-La to honor those guys, to carry on that legacy. Or, on another hand, we could say that the reason why Iceberg knows about Galley-La and named his company that is because of Pluton. We can't forget, Pluton was a thing from the Void Century. We have blueprints of Pluton. which we don't know who made them, mind you. We don't know who made those blueprints. And we do know that it is indeed a ship that has been built. It's currently residing underneath Wano. So somebody had to have built it. So maybe it was Galley-La. Maybe Galley-La left their name on the Pluton blueprints in Iceberg. While he was looking through them, he saw the name and said, you know what? Let's go with that. I love it. Oh man, I know that's all in the theory realm, but I think that fits so well. And hey, maybe I'm too lost in the sauce, but I do think it would just make perfect sense if they were the ones who cooked up Pluton in the past, and not just that, but maybe even Uranus, right? Because when you think about it, right now, a lot of people believe that these are the guys who created the Noah's Ark a long time ago. Which makes sense, right? We do know that there is a mystery group out there that the Sea Kings were talking about. They were like, oh, you know, Luffy and Hody Jones, their fight destroyed the front of the Noah's Ark. We should take the ship to them. We don't know who they are. You know, it's still a mystery to us right now, but I do think Galley-La are the top candidates. It is a giant ship. The Noah's Ark is massive, so I do think you need giants to fix a ship that size. I think they just fit the bill. And the thing about the Noah's Ark is that it is related to an ancient weapon, Poseidon. Poseidon is the one who's supposed to have the Sea Kings carry the ship in the final war during the Great Flood. Well, if we connected Galley-La to one ancient weapon already, would it actually be so crazy to connect them to Pluton as well? Or maybe even Uranus? Maybe that is the reason why the world government holds such animosity towards the giants. Because a long time ago, they played a role in cooking up all of the ancient weapons or things surrounding the ancient weapons. Hell, they maybe even made Joy Boy's ship. We already know that Joy Boy was a pirate in the past. Maybe they were the ones who made his ship, right? Just like how Luffy and the Oro Jackson are made out of atom wood. It wouldn't be nuts if Joy Boy's ship was also made out of atom wood. And where would they get the atom wood? From Elbaph, baby! So yeah, I do think Galley-La is the great glue that connects everything here. So now, as far as the second rumor that Yarul talks about, the rumor that there's a frozen giant army out there, I do still think this relates to Galley-La. I do see a world where the first rumor about Galley-La and the second rumor about the frozen giants are two separate things. I see that possibility, but I do think it's all connected here too. And that is because of the silhouettes we get of Galley-La. You know, we see this giant, massive face in the background, and a lot of people, mind you, it started from leakers, but the leakers pointed out that the giant in the background looks oddly similar to the frozen giant we saw back at Punk Hazard. I think that's them. I think the giants we saw back at Punk Hazard might be Galley-La current day. So if that is the case, if Galley-La are encased in ice at Punk Hazard, will they ever be unthawed? Because to our knowledge, they're not frozen via special methods, right? They're simply encased in ice. So somebody could just go there and thaw them out. You know, somebody could go there and melt the ice. I mean, hell, maybe nobody even has to do that. With the rising water situation, who's to say that the waters around Punk Hazard simply don't flood the room and they just melt naturally? And if they do come back, maybe they could be used to ready Pluton for war if we ever break that bad boy out. Or maybe the Sea Kings are waiting right outside of Punk Hazard for these guys to repair the Noah's Ark. I think there's a lot of potential for these guys to make a comeback, and that's crazy to think about, right? The giants frozen in ice from, what, like 300 or 400 chapters ago, they actually matter. And I guess the last thing we have to ask is, who froze these giants in the past? Because keep in mind, you know, this is a flashback that takes place 56 years ago, and even then, we don't know when they got frozen. They could have been frozen yesterday, a year ago, 2 years ago. Jarl doesn't exactly hit us with a proper date. He simply says that he received a letter, right? Who knows how far that letter actually traveled even. So with that being the case, who did it? Who from the Marines or world government did the deed? I've been seeing some people saying that the person who did it was actually Kuzan, which is initially what we thought back at Punk Hazard. right? We got to Punk Hazard, we saw frozen giants, we saw a frozen tundra. We assumed that was Kuzan's doing. But now that we have this time frame in mind, the giants were there for a long time, well before Kuzan and Akainu fought on that island. I mean, hell, 56 years ago, Kuzan wasn't even born yet. So I do not think it is Kuzan related. I do think it could be a previous user of the Hiei Hiei no Mi, the Ice Ice Chill Chill Devil Fruit that Kuzan has. And I think that'd be kind of interesting, right? Because that would mean that the Marines-world government are keeping certain devil fruits in circulation among their ranks. And I think that makes a lot of sense. That might be one of the most meta things that the world government or Marines would have been doing this entire series if they've been keeping these strong devil fruits within their ranks. And I think that's really easy to do as well, right? The Marines and the world government, they have such an omnipotent presence around the world. They have Marines stationed pretty much everywhere. So if they know that a user of a certain devil fruit is going to die soon, yeah, send a message to all Marines, hey, check the bushes. Hey, check some trees every now and then, right? I think it is easy as that. Of course, you know, that isn't always going to work, but if that is what they did for the Chill Chill fruit, I think that'd be perfect. That's a great way to keep such a powerful top-tier devil fruit within the good guy's hands. You know, obviously, if you consider Kuzan a good guy. Another theory regarding this that I saw is that maybe this was Venus's doing. And, you know, I saw this in the YouTube comment section. I thought it was phenomenal. But somebody said maybe Venus, V Nasujuro, was the one who froze these giants. Because back on Egget Island, we saw that when he takes on his Bakotsu demon form, he is able to use the chill of the underworld. That is how he froze the circuitry of the Pacifista. So who's to say that he doesn't have like a wide sweeping AoE ice attack and he's the one who actually did it? And hey, I think that theory is actually pretty fire. And we do know that Venus, just like the other Gorosei members, has abnormal lifespan potential, right? So yeah, if you're telling me that he did this 60, 70, 100 years ago, I would believe you. So one last thing I do want to make note of before we move on, but when it comes to Galley-La creating the Noah's Ark or Joy Boy ship or Pluton or maybe even Uranus in the past, we have to keep in mind that it is not this generation of Galley-La. You know, giants can only live for so long. Even ancient giants can only live for so long. The average lifespan is about 3 times that of a regular human. Jarl right now is the oldest living giant at 406 years old. So I do not believe that the Galley-La silhouettes we get in this chapter are the ones from the Void Century. No. I think it might be their grandparents. It might be their parents even. But yeah, we do have to keep that in mind. So this is a 2nd or 3rd generation of Galley-La that we're actually witnessing here. Not like they're, you know, any lesser because they're 2nd or 3rd generation, but just, you know, wanted to throw that out there because I have seen people saying that, oh, like, there's no way the timelines don't match. But it's like, guys, they probably just had kids, you know? They probably just had kids and then passed down the information. I think that is the simplest solution there. We go on, and we see Loki is causing some havoc. He ends up killing the Horse of Fortune. We don't know why he did it. It looks like the Horse of Fortune is actually Loki's first victim, right? Yeah, I'm scrolling through the chapter right now. The Lucky Horse is the first confirmed kill that Loki has on his record board. To be fair, we don't know if Loki actually killed the horse. That was one of the rumors a long time ago when we first met Loki. And then even in this chapter, they just said, whoa, the horse is dead. And then we see Loki kind of beaten up. So I think we're to assume he did it. But yeah, that was his first victim. His second victim is actually Estrid's brother, because we see that his body was found in the realm of the dead, and Loki in that panel is actually smiling. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he's the one who did it, and I think the guy got what was coming to him, right? It seemed like he was abusive. He was just as bad as Estrid, so that is all fair. It's funny. I gave Estrid kind of a pass last week because she was kind of pretty. But for Estrid's brother, I really just said, F it, dude. Get his ass out of here. That's crazy, man. You can see the bias coming out. I love it. So we go on, and we're now 48 years before present day. King Harold is going on another diplomatic mission. And right after he leaves the village, Loki ends up creating chaos. So I think this makes sense. You know, looking at Loki right now and how he's acting, I think there's a lot of layers to this. On one end, he probably is anger-riddled, right? He probably just wants to release his rage on others. That makes sense. On another hand, I think the reason why he waits for King Harold to leave might be because he wants his dad to come back home. Obviously, it's not stated verbatim, but I could see that being a reality because Loki does not act up when his daddy's around. He only acts up when he's gone. This could be seen as Loki's plea for his dad to come back and spend some time with them. This could even be Loki being mad that Harold is not taking Loki with him, which I think would be such a W, by the way. I mean, at this age, Loki is pretty powerful, right? I don't think anybody's denying that. Loki is powerful. Harold, bring your son with you. You're going on diplomatic missions. He is the Prince of Elbaph. He needs to learn about these things. Take your son. Kind of like how King Cobra, a fellow king, mind you, brought Vivi to the Reverie so that she could learn manners and, learn about the world. Why not do that for Loki? That's all I'm saying, man. I feel like Loki would have been so different, again, if we just made that one little tweak. So yes, Loki ends up unleashing the animals from the underworld on the Sun Realm, and he's attacking the weak and feeble. He's saying, hey, Elbaph has no need for weak giants. That is when Hyrden stands up to Loki saying, hey, Dad went through hell to rebuild this village. Loki lathers on a lot of disrespect, saying, hey, you're calling my father your dad? Get out of here. You're not even the crown prince. Never associate me with you ever again, you dirty blood. That is when Loki ends up beating the hell out of Hyrden. And that is when we see the new giant warrior pirates in their younger years rush to Hyrden's aid. Gerd, Goldberg, I think you see Stanson in the background as well. They're all making their way over to Hyrden to see if he's okay. And Loki, after witnessing that sight, he starts crying. You can't tell because he has the bandages on, but the way Oda shades his face and then, the little marks you see underneath his cheek, yeah, he's crying, dude. He wishes that he was Hyrden. He wishes that he had friends. Again, like I said, if you just put baby Loki and Hyrden in a room, they would have worked things out, guys. Come on. But yeah, Loki, distraught by this, ends up causing more pain. He spreads more and more destruction. And his next victim is actually a little kid. Yeah, it's like a little kid. So he ends up attacking a family and what seems to be their dog. It could be a dog from the underworld. I'm not really too sure what that is. Like, guys, go check out the panel where it says, and destruction, but nothing he did filled the hole in his heart. Like, look at that panel. What is that thing? It looks like Fenrir, right? The Fenrir nightmare monster that Killian brought out. It looks like that, but I'm assuming it's just a giant dog wolf thing. But yeah, Loki fights his family off. And after he injures a little baby, we see the mother of that child rush over, and she ends up giving Loki a really mean look. Loki sees that scene again, kind of like the Hyrden scene. He sees that compassion and that camaraderie, and he bites his lip. He tries to hold in the tears, and that is when we see him throw himself off the Sun Realm in an attempt to off himself. And when he realizes that he's still alive, he starts crying even harder, saying, man, I can't even die properly. Yeah, I like Loki. I think this is a phenomenal backstory. It makes me feel really bad for Loki. And I'll say it again, brother, but he just needed one friend. He just needed one person in his camp. We didn't have to change his entire life, I was over here offering options like, oh, he should go live with Ida, live with Hyrden, maybe he should go with his dad. Those are all solutions, but in reality, he just needed the bare minimum. Dude, if this guy had a Yamato type situation where even just a random person showed an ounce of kindness to Loki, he would be so different. But he doesn't have that. He does not have that at all. So, while he's down here in the underworld, we see in the background a mountain get split. Pretty absurd, but not a feat we haven't seen in One Piece, right? We've seen mountains be split before. But guys, remember this is Elbaph. That is a giant-sized mountain that is getting split. And we see somebody saying, what's the deal with this island? Where the hell is the welcoming committee? The animals are growling. And that is when we see 4 shadows approach Loki. 4 silhouettes. And they say, oh ho ho, we found one. Look, it's a giant whelp. This is definitely Elbaph. And that is when we see them, dude. The amount of aura that these guys have. Like, brother, we've seen a lot of groups in One Piece. I think these guys have freaking aura. We see him the golden lion Shiki. He's laughing. He says, "Jah, this brat, he's got one hell of a devil face." Kind of crazy, mind you, right? Like, imagine you're Loki. People have been making fun of your eyes left and right. Your eyes are cursed. Your mom hates you because of your eyes, yada, yada. And now you have strangers rolling up and they beat it even more, saying, "Yep, those are some crazy eyes you got there, kid." And then on the other hand, you have Whitebeard, who's more compassionate, mind you. You know, Whitebeard's like, "Oh, this kid's, he's really big, even for a giant, right?" And then he goes on and he says, "Hey, kid, why are you crying?" And it's like, damn, dude, even back then, Whitebeard cared about other people, man. Like, how does Whitebeard fit in with these guys? Like, that was the question back during the God Valley reveal when we learned that Whitebeard was a part of Rox's crew. It was like, wait, how was Whitebeard working alongside Big Mom, Kaido, and then this other pirate? Like, what is going on here? But yes, that is where we go on. And we also see Stussy in the background as well. She doesn't really have any dialogue. She's more quiet in this panel. And the main dialogue, though, the main chutzpah of this page goes to the man, the myth, the legend, Rocks D Xebec. He comes in and he says, "All right, kid, you better say yes to both of these questions. I ain't the type that takes no for an answer. First off, this is Elbaph, land of the giants, yeah? Second, we'll find Herald here, yeah?" And then we see him throw up the two fingers for the two questions, and we get the whole reveal. Rocks D Xebec, future captain of the Rocks Pirates, in parentheses, father of Emperor Blackbeard. Bro, where do I even start? First up, he looks like a amalgamation of a Yu-Gi-Oh main character and Blackbeard. I mean, dude, look at his hair. And then go look at, like, Yu-Gi-Moto. You know what I mean? Like, my God, dude. He looks like the type of guy that sends your ass to the Shadow Realm. But yeah, guys, I don't even know where to start. Like, I'm really thinking about it. Like, man, what do we talk about first? I mean, we even have the narrator box that goes on. And they're like, yeah, Herald spotted this particular man 8 years ago during the Reverie. He single-handedly killed a Navy HQ admiral, and then he vanished without a trace. This feat earned him a massive bounty and the government's ire. Bro, you're telling me he murked an admiral off screen? Who did he kill? I mean, potentially, it could be the previous user of the Hiei no Mi, so that it could tie everything together, right? Oh, you know, Rocks killed that guy, and then the fruit respawned, and then it went to Kuzan years later. I think that'd be pretty cool. That'd be a really nice way to tie things up. We could even say that this admiral is related to one of the current admirals, right? That's not unheard of. We have a lot of characters being revealed to be related to other people. Maybe this admiral is related to Akainu. Maybe he's related to Sengoku. Maybe Kuzan. Maybe Kizaru. Or hell, maybe someone else altogether. I think this is great. So here on the side, I wrote down some notes on what I want to talk about in regards to this chapter. I know, kind of lame, but I do want to make sure I don't miss anything. So let's point this out first. This is not the king that Herald went to the Reverie with. I think that is the case because of how the narrator words all of this in that final page. They say that Herald spotted this particular man 8 years ago. It didn't say that Herald went with this particular man. No. Two very different things. Herald simply saw this guy from afar. So with that being the case, why was Rocks D Xebec at the Reverie? Was he a king of a nation, or did Rocks invite himself? Because you don't need an invitation to go to the Reverie, right? If you're a bad guy, you can just show up. Like, you have free will. Technically, Luffy could have gone to the Reverie if he actually cared, but he didn't. So that is one thing I'm questioning right now. Like, was Rocks D Xebec simply a guy that wanted to go uncover the truth of the world and cause chaos? Or was he a king that ended up causing a scene? If I had to put my money down on one or the other, I would lean more towards the theory that he is a king. And that's because of Blackbeard, right? A lot of things that Blackbeard has done thus far mirrors Xebec in some way, or at least you can see the Xebec inspiration. Which is why, well before we got this reveal, a lot of people knew that Rocks D Xebec and Blackbeard were connected already. We just didn't know how. We didn't know if they were father and son. We didn't know if Xebec is possessing Blackbeard or something of the sort. We knew they were connected. We just didn't know how. So with that being said, Blackbeard current day wants to become King Blackbeard, the king of Hachinosu. Well, I mean, if King of Hachinosu is actually a thing, we know that Rocks D Xebec owned Hachinosu in the past, so maybe he was the king of that island, and that is why he was at the Reverie. I think that is where I'm putting my chips at, but of course, he could just simply be a wild card that showed up out of nowhere. So now, as far as why he killed a Marine Admiral, that is where it kind of gets dicey. I think there's a lot of reasons to kill a Marine Admiral, right? Even though I love those guys, you gotta admit, you know, not everybody in the Marines are squeaky clean. There are a lot of bad actors in there, so maybe Rocks D Xebec had a grudge against that Marine Admiral. That could be the case. Another route could be that maybe Rocks D Xebec was fighting celestial dragons up there. Maybe he slapped a celestial dragon, and then because of that, an admiral got sent over. We do know that is a canon event, right? You attack a celestial dragon, the response is an admiral shows up. So that could be the case right there. You know, Rocks D Xebec is simply a guy that wanted to save some slaves. Maybe he just didn't like the rulers of the world. And then boom, Navy HQ admiral shows up, Rocks kills him. He absolutely murks that guy. I think that's pretty solid. So as far as how he was able to vanish without a trace, I don't know. You know, vanishing from Marie's Raw without a trace is pretty absurd, but it's not so absurd that it needs a proper explanation. Because keep in mind, current day, Sabo disappeared without a trace. Vivi disappeared without a trace. Waphole disappeared without a trace. That right there is what the newspapers were touting. But we know the truth. We know that they were simply hiding underneath ship decks. So it could be the same case here where Rock simply hid in a ship and that's how he vanished without a trace. I'm not too hung up on that line necessarily. So now the next thing that I do gotta ask is, why are Shiki, Whitebeard, and Stussy with Rocks right now? Because you gotta keep in mind, the narrator, Oda, you know, writing in the Rocks description, says that he is the future Rocks pirate captain. He's not a pirate captain right now. In the future, he will be. So right now, Rocks is literally just a wanted man. He is just some guy. So why are they following him? Do they see his potential? Or maybe they were related to Hachinosu. You know, maybe they were with him at the Reverie even. Or maybe Xebec is in the process of starting a pirate crew, you know? He hasn't called himself a pirate captain yet. He's simply gathering the members before he can do that. Maybe it's like, you know, like in World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy, you need like 3 people to start up a guild. Maybe it's like that. So, yeah, that could be the case. Next thing we have to ask is, why is Xebec here in Elbaph? Why is he after King Harold? It could be that Xebec saw King Harold back at the Reverie and saw that he was an ancient giant. Maybe he saw King Harold's strength and was like, whoa, I want that guy in my crew. You know, kind of like how Luffy sees unique looking characters and Luffy's like, hey, you look weird, join my crew. Maybe Xebec is the same way. He saw King Harold, he was impressed, and now he's coming to recruit him. And I saw somebody comment, and I love this comment as well, but they said that Harold would actually hold decent value in a pirate crew because he knows how to navigate. Last chapter, we saw that Harold was using a compass, and he talked about the Polar Star. He could be a very well-versed navigator, and that is exactly what Xebec wants, right? Before he can start a pirate crew, he needs a navigator. So maybe that's it. Another theory that I cooked up, actually, is that maybe Xebec is here for Galley-La. Maybe he's coming here for the ancient giant shipwrights. Because if you want to be a captain of a pirate crew, you need a pirate ship. So what better place to go to than Elbaph, the home of Adamwood and the home of these ancient giant shipwrights? Of course, they don't live here anymore, but, you know, I don't know if that's like common knowledge. So yeah, maybe Xebec is coming here to simply get a ship from good old King Harold. Unfortunately, though, I don't think King Harold is home. Yeah, let me look through the chapter again. Yeah, King Harold is like constantly leaving his home, dude. In a way, King Harold is kind of like Yasopp, man. Just leaving his kids home alone, leaving the wife, and she's just dying. Wow, wait, are there a lot of parallels between Loki and Usopp and King Harold and Yasopp? Maybe. Maybe I'm just like imagining things, though. But yeah, I don't think Harold is here. Loki only goes on his rampages when Daddy's not around, and he just got done rampaging in a village, and that's why he threw himself off. So I don't think Harold is here right now. So maybe Xebec just waits around, and maybe that is why Loki grows so attached towards Xebec, right? Because like for Shanks, for example, Shanks spends multiple days at Fuchsia Village. So it could be the same case here, where Xebec is spending multiple days at Ida's Tavern. And the reason why Xebec lingers around is because he's simply waiting for Harold to come back home. And who knows when that's going to be, right? You know, could be tomorrow, could be next year, 5 years down the line. That's a freaking mystery. So with this reveal, one of the main questions I am wondering about right now is, why is Blackbeard so motivated to be like his father? Of course, you may be saying, Sai, like, yeah, it's his dad. Of course he wants to be like his dad. But here's the thing. Blackbeard was 2 years old when his dad died. There's a good chance that Rocks spent no quality time with Blackbeard at all because he was pirating at the time. So what is it, right? Did Rocks leave behind a logbook? Did Blackbeard's mom, you know, hammer in that he should be like his dad? Does Blackbeard simply want to live up to his father's legacy and supersede him? That's really tough. You know, and that's why for the longest time, I don't know if you guys remember the theories, you know, they seem so outdated now with this reveal, but people were saying that maybe Rocks is possessing Blackbeard. You know how like inherited will is a major theme in One Piece? Maybe Rocks D Xebec is using forced will, and he's making Blackbeard do everything like him. Dude, I don't know, man. And, you know, it's not one of those things where it's like, oh, they just so happen to have the same dream. No. Blackbeard named his ship after his dad. Blackbeard is currently riding the Saber of Xebec. He's riding his daddy's saber, dude. He even took over his dad's stomping grounds, man. They have the same dream, you know, like they're moving the same way. They look the same. Something's going on here. You know, I want to know how Blackbeard got so inspired. And, you know, speaking of that inspiration, this is beautiful in a way, because it just drives home how amazing and deep the Blackbeard and Ace fight truly is. Because no longer is it just a stepping stone in Blackbeard's journey, but you could almost see it as Rocks and Roger 2.0, right? I mean, Del, we have the son of Roger, Ace, fighting the son of Rocks, Blackbeard. And dude, Blackbeard takes the cake there, man. Absolutely insane. And, you know, what's funny to think about that too is that Ace hates his dad. You know, Ace does not like Roger. He didn't want to be like Roger. Dude, you mention Roger's name in front of Ace, and Ace gets mad, right? He keeps on saying, Whitebeard's my real dad. Whitebeard's my real dad. I don't care about Roger. Whereas Blackbeard is the exact opposite, dude. He wants to be just like his dad. So it's funny seeing that, you know, that parallel there, that dynamic. And now, another thing we got to ask, you know, I mentioned the W name, but Whitebeard. Did Whitebeard know that Blackbeard was actually his former captain's son? I think so. I definitely think that Whitebeard knew. Whitebeard's not dumb, right? You know, Whitebeard is not a dumb cookie. I think he definitely knew that he housed the son of Roger and Rocks under the same flag. You gotta remember, Whitebeard is one of those characters who vehemently has stated that he does not care who you are born to. He doesn't care about who your father is because he believes that everybody is a child of the sea at the end of the day. I mean, hell, Squard hated Ace because of Roger, and Whitebeard said, hey, Ace did nothing to you. You know, whatever the dad did has nothing to do with the kid. So I could see a scenario where Whitebeard knew all along that he had Rocks' son, and despite Rocks being a madman, Whitebeard gave Blackbeard the benefit of the doubt. He gave Blackbeard a really good, fair shot in his crew. And, you know, the thing is, if we're saying that Whitebeard didn't know, let's imagine the opposite. Whitebeard did not know that Blackbeard was Rocks' son. What that tells me is that Whitebeard's cancer progressed so far that he could not see the striking similarities between Blackbeard and Rocks because they look damn near identical, dude. Like, hair aside, look at the face, look at the nose. They're the same person, dude. What do you mean you don't know? So yeah, I would rather believe that Whitebeard knew all along, because if he didn't, then he's just blind. So now, speaking of striking resemblances, I've seen this theory floating around all day, but people are saying that not only does he look like Blackbeard, but if you cover a certain side of his face, he kind of looks like Buggy. I get it, you know, but beforehand, before we got this big reveal, Buggy was one of the main candidates for Rocks' son. Blackbeard was always up there, but Buggy was always a close second theory. And I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, obviously, you know, I throw that theory a lot of bones. I do like the idea. I think Buggy's lineage will be tackled later on, and I think it will be grand. But now that we have the whole reveal that Rocks is, of course, Blackbeard's dad, would Oda really double up and also make Rocks the father of Buggy? That right there is why I'm really hesitant about this theory. Of course, I will keep an eye on this theory moving on to the next chapter. I need more details and more threads to pull at than just the whole covering half of his face thing. Because right now, you know, while I do see where people see Buggy, I still just kind of see Blackbeard, so I don't know. You know, I think I do have to sit on that theory for a little bit longer. But yeah, I do kind of see where people are coming from with that one. So now, the next thing I want to talk about is Blackbeard current day and Garp. You know, hey, people are saying that Blackbeard is going on a revenge tour. You know, Blackbeard's already killed Whitebeard. Blackbeard already killed Ace. Well, he didn't kill Ace, but, you know, he led to Ace's downfall. And then, not just that, but Blackbeard also defeated Wang Ji, another member of the Rocks Pirates. And now people are saying, who else is next? Is Blackbeard going to go through all of the old gen, all the people related to Rocks' downfall, and actually slaughter them? I think yes. You know, if Blackbeard is over here already riding his dad's meat this hard, I would not be shocked if he did have the revenge tour in mind. And like I said, if that's the case, Garp is in trouble. Garp is definitely in trouble. Because Garp was one of the main players at God Valley, and Garp fought against Rocks, dude. So yeah, I cannot wait to see a present-day Hachinosu update where Garp talks to Blackbeard. Would Garp notice right off rip that Blackbeard is Rocks' son? I think so. You know, just like how I said that Whitebeard should have noticed right off rip, I think Garp will know right away. I mean, hell, I wouldn't be surprised if Garp knew day one, like the minute that Blackbeard was born. I wouldn't be shocked if Garp was right there, you know, reading the telecoms and knowing that it's happening. Because, you know, the whole thing with Garp is that Garp was the only character that knew that Ace was actually Roger's relative. So maybe Rocks had the same relationship with Garp to an extent, or maybe Garp kind of knew about Rocks' kid, but he didn't care as much because obviously he doesn't like Rocks. So maybe Garp shares that similarity where he's like, oh, you know, your dad talked about you before, you know, I knew you were born. Hell, I remember back in the day, it was a popular theory that Blackbeard was actually the treasure of Hachinosu, which, you know, I think definitely comes back into play here. There is a chance that, you know, Rocks did care about his son a lot, and he was the treasure of Hachinosu. I don't know how that would play out, because we would have to describe how Blackbeard goes from God Valley all the way to Shadeport, but that theory is now getting revitalized because of this chapter. So, next thing we gotta talk about is Blackbeard's lineage, his special lineage. Back when Van Augur and Devon were at Egget Island and they were talking to Saturn, they mentioned that Blackbeard is special. So, is Blackbeard special because of this right here? Because he's related to Rocks D Xebec? Or is there still more to it? Because I can see a world where it is the lineage, you know? He's actually Rocks D Teach. And they knew about it. The Gorosei knew about it. That is why he's so damn special. But that right there does not explain the rest of the abnormalities with Blackbeard. Because we have to keep in mind, it is canon. It's still there. But Blackbeard has not slept once. According to the people among Roger's crew, Blackbeard doesn't sleep. And then we back that up current day with Marco. Marco says that Blackbeard's always been a little bit off. Blackbeard's body is really strange. So there is still a chance that Blackbeard is from a special tribe or has something different about him. And since Xebec looks so similar to Blackbeard, there's a chance that even Xebec is special in that regard as well. There's a chance that Xebec does not sleep, that Xebec has a weird body. And then, of course, another thing that has yet to be explained with Blackbeard is why he's able to eat 2 devil fruits, right? Did Xebec have the same abilities? Could Xebec eat 2 devil fruits in the past? We don't know. Hell, we don't even know if Rocks has a devil fruit, right? If I had to put money down, though, I would say that Rocks does have a devil fruit. Because, going back to the whole Blackbeard copying his dad route, Blackbeard has been on a hunt for devil fruits. He truly values those powers. And we gotta ask ourselves, where does he get that mindset from? Of course, devil fruits are powerful. There's nothing wrong with believing that. But maybe that's another thing that was passed down to him from his dad. Maybe his dad had a bunch of devil fruits. Maybe his dad wanted to surround himself with a bunch of devil fruits. Maybe that's why he attacked God Valley, not just because of the treasure of Hachinosu being stolen, but because he heard that there were multiple devil fruits up for auction there. Also, before we head out, I have seen people saying that maybe Rocks has the Ope Ope no Mi, because in that final panel, you see Rocks have his 2 fingers out like this, and that's how Law typically does his Shambles ability. I don't think that's the case. I simply think the reason why he has his fingers out like that is because he's asking Loki 2 questions. I mean, it could be both, right? Maybe it's also to throw up the 2 questions, but also he's doing the Shambles. But I don't think that's it. I think it would be better if Rocks had a different devil fruit, or maybe even the Yami Yami no Mi. Again, that would tie back to Blackbeard craving the Yami Yami. Maybe that's because his dad had that power. Another thing people are talking about is how Rocks D Xebec cut that mountain. We don't see a sword on him right away, but we do know that later on, during God Valley, Rocks D Xebec does have a sword. Because in that little silhouette that Sengoku gave us, Rocks had a cutlass just like Roger. So maybe he does have a sword on him, but we just don't see it in that panel because the angle is weird. Maybe it has to do with his devil fruit, or it could have been Shiki or Whitebeard. The mountain being cut doesn't have to be attributed to just Rocks D Xebec. We got to remember that he has people behind him. So there is the chance that they're the ones who cut the mountain, and Rocks is just chilling on the side. But yeah, I think I pretty much covered everything I wanted to talk about. I'm looking over here at my list. Yeah, for the most part. I mean, of course, we'll be back, in the next day or two to talk more about this anyway. So it's not like, this is my one and only shot. But yeah, with that being said, though, guys, thank you so much for spending your time here. I really freaking appreciate it. Let me know all your thoughts about this chapter down below, all your theories, all your opinions, and your takeaways. I would love to hear it down there. And of course, in the next couple of days, we will be coming back and doing a comment video, so we will be reading through some of your comments, so make sure to post it, and there's going to be a pretty high chance that I will read through it. And also, not just that, but I will be doing another poll video where I go through the polls in regards to this chapter and some other stuff, and we'll talk about that there. So we're going to have a lot of conversations in the next couple of days. But yes, again, thank you for your time. You guys stay safe, and have a great rest of your day, brothers.